Greetings, webheads, and welcome to episode 7 of Witty Banter, yet another Marvel Crisis Protocol podcast. I'm Patrick.
I'm Alex.
I'm David.
This is John Paul.
We are here to help you get better at and have more fun with your Crisis Protocol. Gentlemen, what have we been up to in the last couple of weeks?
Playing games. I mean,
I know you were very excited to show us you were painting MODOK.
I'm assembling.
He's assembling.
Oh, assembling. That's fair.
Assembling.
MODOK 2.
Yeah,
Yes.
MODOK 2. I mean, yeah, we've just been playing games. We're getting ready for squad goals. I'm excited for that.
Goals.
That'll be fun.
We got a
When
tournament.
Yeah. I like playing games with sharks.
Squad goals is in May.
Yeah, 18th
I think so.
that weekend.
18th and 19th.
Yeah, we'll have to give an update on how that goes.
Yeah, we'll have to. We got to do all the stuff for that though. But yeah. We're registered though, right? Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, we are registered.
So yeah, we're gonna go to that. And yeah, I don't know what you guys are doing.
We got a little business to take care of. Since we joined you last, we've had 3 new Patreons, all itsy bitsy spiders. So I want to thank Zach Vredenberg, Alistair Glenn, and Andrew Brown. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate the support. If you want to help us, if you want to support what we're doing, go to patreon.com/wittybantercast and join us. You get a number of different benefits. You get priority dojoing of rosters you select, and you get entries into our giveaway. So we do have our giveaway winner to announce. Tom Stewart has won the most recent giveaway. So Tom, put your thinking cap on. I know. Put your thinking cap on and figure out who you want to have JP paint up.
Make it Sabretooth.
Yeah, we're really all voting for Sabretooth, aren't we?
I think it'd be great. JP, your Sabretooth looks great anyway, so.
I didn't actually paint Sabretooth one.
I thought you had painted Sabretooth one.
I've got chubby trench coat Sabretooth that's surfing on a log
on
a base that's way too small.
Yeah,
I
feel like they designed him to be on a medium base and then went, oh wait, we can't have this guy with a pounce on a medium base.
Size 3, medium move, medium base pounce. No.
Yeah, we can't have this on this guy.
So Red Panther, he's going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem because apparently he's back.
So we're at a point now where we're going to be able to do giveaways monthly. So our next giveaway is going to be the Gwenom and Scarlet Spider box. So we will do that when we record episode 9. So that'll be a month from now. So you got plenty of time to get your entries in, get yourself set up, and hopefully you can be as lucky as Tom is. Except this time you're on your own painting. We're not doing that one for you. Alex, can you tell us a little bit? We've got our own pretty good sized tournament that's coming up.
Yeah, we've got Bug Eater. This is, I want to say, either the 12th or 13th year.
Yeah, something like that.
This will be
we lost a year because of COVID, so it was weird.
Yeah, we lost a year due to COVID. This will be the 3rd year. MCP will be a Bug Eater. But it'll be May 31st, June 1st, and June 2nd. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday will be team tournament. 3 players per team. Cannot repeat characters, tactics cards, or crisis cards. And then Saturday will be the Contest of Champions, just a standard tournament. If we have enough players to make a top 8 cut, we'll do it Sunday for top 8. And then
it's an LVO qualifier, right?
Yep, it is an LVO qualifier. And then Sunday will be a what if standard tournament, but nowhere near as serious as Contest of Champions because I put together crazy things that'll happen each round. Like one example, last year I added the opportunity to select a banned or restricted card from the previous set, like drop off. You could have drop off even though it was banned, and it did not count towards your 5. So it's just like have fun with a card that you missed.
Yeah, it was super. That was super fun.
Yeah, everybody got to
I used
see
field
how.
dressing to like bring back Agent Venom and like daze Deaton's entire team with a beam. It was ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Yeah, everybody got to see how somehow Cable was the reason drop off was banned, but I don't believe it.
Drop off was the reason why Cable got annihilated on round 1 by Dormammu.
Alex, did you is the Bug Eater gonna qualify for the new tournament that AMG just announced?
I have put the application in. Haven't heard anything yet. If I remember correctly, they're gonna announce the first round mid-May, so I would assume May 17th ish. And I'll find out what all that entails.
Do we have to know if it's going to be 32 for them to have it qualify, or how does that work?
I told them that we're shooting for 32 minimum, but I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna work.
Well, I know they put a thing on it that was like number of players may vary depending on population or region or whatever.
For sure, but I mean, I would assume that's for populations of 1,000 people, but they have a friendly local store or like a venue that could run something larger. But obviously, with a population of 1,000, they can't really meet Omaha standards, you know.
It also sounded, some of it was like they were going to have each region have a number of them too. So I that's what I thought some of that was about.
Yeah,
maybe based on population.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there'd be more. Yeah, you'll be able
Wonder
to
if
get
they're
more.
building to something, maybe.
I don't know. It's an interesting step they've taken, and to have them make a point to say that it's scored in such a way that it rewards participation. I'm going to be really interested to see the details of how that works.
Yeah, I am too.
I'm interested too. I'm curious as to what they mean by support too, because if it's something like, oh, your tournament's got 64 people, here's 25 dice, like give them out. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
well, I guess I'm not doing that next year because that seems pointless.
They were pretty. It seemed like they were pretty generous with the price support at Adepticon. At least that was the impression I got from people that went.
Yeah, but that's also them running Adepticon. So,
Right.
like not Adepticon itself, but running their events at Adepticon, and they're like, we all know they've got buckets of those dice in a warehouse somewhere that they just don't want to give away.
Yeah, or sell.
Yeah.
I would buy them.
They're like swimming around in blue dice, like Scrooge McDuck in his bank vault, just
Yeah.
like spitting out dice as he's swimming through them.
Look at these amazing dice. Got like a high dive.
Like
Just
backstroking through them and shit.
I am gonna have that.
They're in a giant water tower.
head.
In a water tower.
A couple of things I did want to mention that I don't think I mentioned last time. Painting is not required for Bug Eater, but there are awards for painting. I always award and give people that take time in the hobby itself too to get something out of it as well.
Well, and you can enter in the overall Bug Eater paint too, right?
I don't know. I've talked to Tim about it before, and I haven't heard anything. He hasn't told me any kind of specific category they need to go into. Just kind of
I thought last time I talked to him, he said something about that like they were putting him in the sci-fi stuff, maybe.
Yeah, I could believe it, but I never got any confirmation from him. So
I think I remember that like 2 years ago they did that. Isn't that right?
Yeah, they've done it every year, with the Golden Gobbo award that they give out, but I've just never had a specific category that they would prefer it in.
With the sci-fi, you have to contend with all the 40k stuff, though.
Right.
Yeah, it's
40K,
hard. Yeah,
Legion, Horus
but I
Heresy.
think if you can do, but they have like army and single model, right? So like
No, they've
single
got
model.
single models and vehicles. Vehicles are separate.
They
Oh
have
yeah,
squad. They have
okay.
squads.
And they have
They have
squad.
Yeah,
squads,
they've got
singles.
squads.
I
But
think like
that's the tough part. Like, we can only enter in one category. Then we get single model, and
I
some of
feel
those
like there's
40K models are ridiculous.
I feel like there's a little bias toward 40k in general, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they make more money.
It's their moneymaker.
Exactly. Speaking of which, how much is the tournament, Alex?
Tournaments, there's $25 for each day, but we are offering a bundle, $60 for the whole weekend. Save about $5 a day if you can get the bundle.
And if somebody wants to find out more or sign up, where would they go?
So I've got a Longshanks link that I've shared everywhere, and we can share it in the Witty Banter post as well for this coming week. But if you want to buy tickets, it's BugEaterGTOmaha.com.
And we'll put the links for everything for that in the show notes, and we'll also have that on all our social media posts. Alex, anything else you want to go over with regards to Bug Eater? I think you said the dates already, but why don't you say the dates again?
Yep, May 31st, June 1st, and June 2nd.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Alex. We're going to dive in now to our main deep dive for today's episode. We wanted to start taking some time to look a little more closely at different crises. You know, how you choose them, how you work against them, just to really kind of get into the nitty gritty of how they work and how you can make them work for you. David, can you kind of, what are your thoughts? Or this was kind of your idea in terms of a topic idea. So start us off.
So I think the first thing I want to talk about is like, I mean, we all do it kind of like sometimes we're just like, oh, we can just play this crisis, or like you just naturally assume, like webs are good on scoundrels and stuff. So you just take scoundrels and not really knowing like how they're good at scoundrels and why they're good at scoundrels and those kind of things. And I feel like a lot of people get them wrong and are taking like completely wrong crisis for whatever they're trying to do. So
You're
like
telling
my
me
philosophy is
virus is
always,
not good for web warriors? Legacy virus is bad for them?
I mean, it could be okay, I guess, but it's probably bad. But I mean, my philosophy is always like any roster can play any crisis as long as they build a plan for it. And once you realize if that plan is better than what your opponent's plan might be, then maybe you can look at that and go, okay, that's what I need to be playing this crisis. Because like that's when you got to look at the overall meta, right? And see what other people are playing and what what kind of affiliations are winning and what crisis they are running.
So what we wanted to do is, so we're gonna do secures one episode, we're gonna do extracts one episode, and really just kind of talk through each one, give some things to think about to really be intentional about what you're doing with your crisis, not only in how your roster is going to play it, but when you see your opponents playing it, what kind of advantages that you can look at or what kind of weaknesses that you're looking at. So David, where do we want to start?
So I think we start with the big thing, right? So we got to start. We're talking about crisis, and we're talking about secures. We also the first thing we got to talk about is threat, right? So a lot of people will just like look at a card and go, "Okay, this is 20 threat. I should be playing that because I want to play a lot of stuff." And you can certainly do that, right? Uh, Nothing wrong with that, but you have to realize that most of the time, you've got a very low percentage to play the threat that you like choose. So you may not get a choice at whatever it is anyway. So the threat is kind of irrelevant, but it's good to have so that you could have the choice of it and if when it comes up, right? So like webs want to play scoundrels, which is the 5 crisis.
I would say threat is more relevant to some teams than others. Some teams are
Yeah,
building toward a certain threat level. Like they have a composition that they really like at a very specific threat level. But that's kind of rare, but that does happen where they're like, okay, I'm going to take these ones because they're exactly the threat I want.
Like, for example, Black Order with 16.
16 or like 19s, I feel like are kind of popular for certain teams.
Yeah.
I think Pat Dunford probably started that with his old Thanos list, his Guardian Thanos
Yeah,
list.
I mean, he was running Senators too, which is like not really a great crisis per se, but it's still
it's so bipolar.
Yeah, it's weird. Definitely weird. It can get away from you if you let it.
It's very scory, but it's also kind of kill boxy. So
Well,
the game is
I guess
fast. It's not like you're trying to table them, but you're trying to kill them in a way that allows you to pick up more extracts than they do and just score out as fast as, I mean, probably as fast as a scenario team would score, depending on the secure. But
well, and like you got to look at too that like we got to talk about what we mean by scory and low like attrition-y crisis. So we're talking about crisis that can score. They basically have more points on the board, so you're going to score more often, right? And then the ones that have low, like 3, they can only score 3 in a round, right? And you also got to pay attention to odds and evens, right? Because like an even extract, you can go, okay, well, my opponent's going to take one, I'm going to take one, they're going to take the other one, I'm going to take the other one, we're going to be at parity, right? So that means if you're going to be at parity there, and you need to try to figure out if you can gain an advantage and try to break parity on the secure, right? So thinking about the odds and evens of it is a little bit. A lot of people don't really think about that, but
that's more for extracts, though, right?
Well, it is definitely more for extracts, right? Because most of them are. How many secures are odd scoring?
Well, like it's like when an extract's picked up, it's picked up. Like the only way you're getting that thing off is killing them or like stealing it, but you're probably not doing that round one. But if someone runs up and flips a secure, you can run up and flip it back, or you could just run up and contest, sit on it with somebody else. It's like, but extracts are like once they're gone, they're gone. So it's kind of a scramble to pick those up. So I think trying to maintain or break parity on those is where you're probably going with that rather than secure.
Yeah. There are some secures you could do it with, right? Though, like scoundrels and
with the right team, yeah.
So a lot of what secures do though is they sort of define what the map's going to look like, where the action's going to happen. Where something like Gamma and Demons, you're playing straight down the middle, whereas some of the more spread out things, you're spread out further. So that really has an impact not only on the roster that you're bringing, but then how you deploy them.
I would agree with that.
Well, and some of them, obviously there's pay to flips, right? And there's the ones you stand on, which those are things to think about too, right? Because the pay to flips are going to affect your power economy. Characters who can throw are much more valuable on pay to flips because they can just throw you and then flip it, and then it's what do they do?
Character throws specifically.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might argue that the contests, like the throw, is better on contests, right? Unless you're playing sword, I suppose.
Yeah.
But like you're not guaranteed to flip it, even if you throw them off.
Right.
That's true.
It's a lot easier if you do throw them off.
Except for sword.
Right.
So when you're creating a roster, do you look to your crisis? Do you look to your secures first to start thinking about how you want to build your team around that, or do you have your team and then work your secures onto the roster that you put in, or how do you address that?
So typically what I do is I will look at I'll like identify something I'm trying to like play with. Like this whole Thanos shield thing. So I was like, okay, I want to play Thanos in as much as possible with Tony's leadership. How do I make that happen? So then I start going through the shield characters and building. I build, about maybe 5 or 6 characters in of the core of like usually they're the affiliated characters, the characters that I want for specific synergies. And then I'll look at those characters and I'll go, okay, what crisis are these guys good at? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to leverage attrition to eventually score points? Are we just trying to like completely table them? Are we trying to score out? Are we trying to just brawl them and then make a push and win? Right? Like all these questions are going to define what tiers and extracts you want to play, right? And then after you decide that, then I bring in the next 4 characters or whatever who are good on the specific crisis that I'm intending to play, or maybe they're like meta tech pieces or something I think that's like, hey, this character is really good in the meta right now because a lot of people are playing webs. Maybe I play Agent Venom, right? Something to consider.
I would add that, like a general rule of thumb, scenario wants to play higher and attrition wants to play lower threats.
Yeah.
That's not always the case, but generally speaking. Like, I feel like the Thanos lists kind of want to play higher just so that they can put Thanos in there and have him actually be effective with Death Decree.
And just for clarification, so why would an attrition list, why would a killy list want to have slower scoring?
I mean, ideally, a killy list is going to table you, right? Like that's not what their aim is, but that's the ideal situation. So the fewer models are on the board, the more easy it is to table you.
And they don't score as quickly, like just by that nature alone.
Yeah,
well, you got to look at the way the system of the game is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't KO somebody on round 1, right? So, round 1, you're not getting any KOs. If you manage to get dazes on round 1, which aren't extremely common, then you're talking about the earliest you can start KOing things is on round 2, right?
Yeah.
Logistically, you're probably doing it on 3, right? You're probably starting to KO models on round 3. So the longer, if like webs can close a game out in round 3. So like if you haven't put enough into them to take extracts off of them and they score out on round 3, you're just like, okay, what do I do, right?
Well, going back to that low threat also, like if you're at say like 15, you can take, like, maybe if your opponent's playing objective team, they can take like 5 characters. But if you can take like 2 characters off the board, they cannot play the game as effectively as they could, like not nearly as effectively. Like they can't cover the secures, they can't pick up the extracts. Like 3 characters is way different than 5. But if you're playing say 20 and they go 7 wide, you've taken 2 characters off and 5 is still super functional for scoring.
Yeah.
So are secures more likely to think about fast scoring, slower scoring, or are you more thinking about something else like shape of the way the game's going to be played, deployment? When you're thinking about secures in your roster formation or in your game planning, what exactly is it that you're looking at?
I think what you want to do is you want to look at like say you're playing scoundrels, right? And at 20. And if your roster has 4 models on the table, right? The most you can score out of that crisis is going to be 4 because you don't have any other models that can score, right? So that's going to leverage how you think about the crisis, right? Because I think you want to try to, if you're trying to play tall and trying to out attrition your opponent, you want to be able to figure out where that sweet spot of is where I can stay in this crisis long enough to not let my opponent outscore me and then I lose, right?
Yeah, Scoundrels is definitely not a secure you want to take just for the threat value. That is a big no-no.
Don't.
I
Like
also think.
Go ahead,
Go ahead, JP. Go ahead.
If you're playing like a Dormammu list, like you probably want high threat stuff because it's hard to fit Dormammu in and tools and stay low threat. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Typically, attrition wants low, but I think Dormammu probably doesn't want like super low. It's just not that good for Dormammu list. But like Scoundrels is completely like it's total dog shit for Dormammu. He does not want to play that.
Yeah,
No.
he doesn't want to play it at all.
Well, and
It's so bad for him.
the threat value thing, attrition wanting lower threat values, scoring wanting higher threat values. You brought up what I was going to bring up. Sometimes it's dependent on the models that you want to play with too. Like a good example here's the Midnight Suns list that you were running. 18 threat is kind of that mid range, I feel. But you yourself purposely didn't play 5 models on that type of secure, or because it was Mad Men. You purposely played super tall with it because that's a sweet spot number because of the models you're playing with.
So funny enough, going back to what I was talking about, I won Show Me with that list, but if it was kind of not super refined, I guess. Like after that tournament, I'm like, man, I would make changes to this. So I was running Scoundrels, I think. And
yeah.
Because Scoundrels, I was just like taking Malekith, Ihulk, Blade, and Wong. And then Madman, I was like, it was 18, so I was taking Blade, Malekith, Wong, or Blade, Malekith, Ihulk. But like those are not good secures for that team. Going back, I would not run those. But I kept losing Prio all day, so it didn't matter. I never played my blues, so it didn't really show its ugly face. But after reflection, it was not ideal. I should have varied the list a little bit and not tried to gun so hard to the 18 threat. But it ended up working out because my dice suck.
So let's walk through that a little bit. You said that you had the secures that you had for your roster ended up being mismatched. So why was that? What was it about the secures that didn't match the roster that you had?
Well, like David was saying, on Scoundrels, there's 5 points, and my plan was to take 4 models, and one of them was Wong, who's pretty vulnerable to just getting,
especially at that time,
dazed.
Yeah, he hadn't been updated.
Yeah, exactly. And at 20 threat, I mean, he's got a lot of people who can just bitch slap him. So then you're down to 3 models who can score. If they're playing an objective team and they bring spiders or cubes or something, yeah, and then you're stuck on Scoundrels too, and you only have 4 models. It kind of sucks. And then Madman.
Well, that would suck if you got hit with a Kingpin Criminal Syndicate.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, the other thing is the blues, the threat level on the blues isn't as important right now because typically, I don't know what the percentage is. I don't even want to pull a number out of my ass, but most times your opponent, if they win prios, are they going to take their blues?
Yeah.
So if you, and same could be said for you. If you win prio, you're probably taking your blues, and they're going to pick threat. So, if you're picking your blues based on a threat level, it may or may not work. Maybe they stupidly don't see what you're trying to do, and they pick the threat level that you want, or maybe the threat levels are just the same, and they have to default to that threat level. But
and you can look at the meta too, right? Because if everybody's running Gamma and Researcher, odds are you're going to end up on 15, right?
Yeah.
So why does everybody take blues? Why is that?
So I've been thinking about that. So when I was playing webs, I was starting to notice that it was better for me to take my extracts because the extracts, they score, there's a higher percentage of their score, right? There's 1/6, right? And there's a boatload of 5s,
right?
And there's a lot of 4s, right? And then the only one that's on the polar end is research, right?
Yeah.
So I always have been noticing that your extract kind of can determine the speed of the game a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to speed up, your opponents, maybe you're looking to take your extra.
Yeah. Is it too simplistic to say that your secures define the shape of the game and your extracts define the speed of the game?
I mean, you could kind of look at it that way. It's not a science, right?
Right.
It's not exact. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you end up on research and, scoundrels, right? and then
that'd be such a weird game. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a weird game.
I played that last night.
Was it weird?
I mean, it depends on what your plan is. Like,
Fair.
if you bring
Was that
scoundrels,
Travis?
what your
Did he
plan
play?
is.
Did he play Kingpin? Was that Travis?
Yep, I played into criminals. I drew his his highest scoring scenario, and he drew my lowest scoring scenario. So, and I was playing Cabal, Thanos Cabal. So I was just trying to kill him off the board, and he was trying to score me off the board. There were 7 points on the board, and I ended up like really stuffing round one really hard. It was like 2-1 in my favor.
Oof.
Yeah, that's good.
It was wild. I was running Space Mine Thanos,
Oh,
so I was
yeah,
able
so
to displace two
like,
people.
Yeah, you're just like, I'm just gonna you off because I don't care.
Yep.
Like maybe the Kingpin Crims roster should be starting to look for characters that can stop displacement, right?
I mean, if they have it innately, maybe, but like they don't have any power.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't know. It's tough because usually those characters are kind of expensive. I feel like Kingpin wants to go wide.
Yeah, he does. I mean, I do like Ultron, like Ultron 2, right? I think he's good.
Yeah, he's good. I don't think he's bad, but it's a 5.
It's just hard. He's expensive.
Kingpin has a hard time fitting. Like Ulik's a great model, but like Kingpin
Yeah.
just has a hard time fitting him in because he could take a 3 and a 2.
Yeah, exactly, right. And they count for scoring so much better, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about scoundrels, right? Okay, let's start talking about crisis themselves, right?
Yes.
So we've been talking about scoundrels, right? So it's 5 points. So the big thing about scoundrels, right, is on top of the fact that it is 20 threat, so like the scoring teams tend to want to go higher, right? On top of the fact it's 20 threat, it's also 5 points. Plus, those points give you cover, which is keeping those models that want to score alive to score. So it can really get out of hand on scoundrels, especially with a lot of teams like Hellfire and Webs, Kingpin Criminals. These teams that can like move up the board on round one and like score your back point and stuff and do shenanigans.
We got to figure there's 25% more points on the board between scoundrels and like riots, just for secures.
Yeah,
like adding another point on top of 4 is like a 25% increase. It's quite a bit.
Yeah, it is quite a bit. Well, and the shape of it is interesting too, right? Because you can stand on the corners and shoot. Like a range 4 character can shoot either the midpoint or the two, well, not the two sides, but the one across from them, and then the one that's like farther they can't quite reach, but if they move they can reach over there. But it's like, do you want to give up your secure to move over there? Is it more valuable to you give up this secure, do something to affect the other secure? Like maybe somebody's already scoring that secure and it doesn't matter, but those are things to think about too.
Yeah, and even then, like if you move to shoot, like they're probably still getting cover.
Right.
Yeah, unless you have like, so like with scoundrels, right? Because of the cover, the value on the characters that have abilities that ignore cover are really, really good. Or the characters that synergize with having cover, like to have defensive rerolls, or like Webs, for example. Like Webs love it because they have a defensive reroll and they can reroll skulls. And they can modify skulls so they can go, oh, this skull's cover now. So it's really good with them.
So yeah, cover really slows the game down. If you're trying to attrition somebody with like a gun line on scoundrels and you're not X-Force, you're gonna have a hell of a time.
Yeah, you better be looking at models that, like, with my shield roster, I'm looking at models that I have that ignore cover, like Agent Venom, Hawkeye. I recently introduced Taskmaster into my roster, and Taskmaster was actually pretty fantastic. I ended up doing like there was a round against Logan's like Immortal Hulk where I moved and did Taskmaster's Spender, where you add the physical value and they can't reroll or modify right. And so it was like it started out 8, and then I added a Desecree, so it was like 12 dice. I ended up doing like 9 damage to Immortal Hulk. It was ridiculous.
It's not terrible.
Yeah, so like Taskmaster's pretty good, and Taskmaster's pretty good on Scoundrels because he has the ability to. He has 2 attacks that ignore cover. He benefits from cover because he can like roll more dice. So like those kinds of things are stuff to think about, right?
Okay, so Scoundrels, you're thinking through the cover, you're thinking through the fact that there's the 5 pieces, in terms of both your roster composition and then or if you're seeing that coming across from you. Let's just go. We'll kind of go in reverse alphabetical orders. The next we'd have intrusions open across seals. A city as seals collapse. So when you see that crisis, what are you thinking? Sort of, what's the first thing that you want to be looking at?
Can we back up something?
Oh,
I wanted to talk about something. So
sure.
the other thing with secures, like you want to know, you need to like get a memory of measurements. Like know that, like on meteors, I know that a medium base, medium mover can move a single move to the back meteor, right? I know for a fact that I can do that. So like learning that you have these type of plays on round 1, the composition of the crisis becomes important, right? Like I caught who did I catch? I caught somebody off guard with I think it was Bob maybe. I shield mobiled Thanos to the middle meteor, and I knew that he could shield mobile and be within range 1 of the middle meteor, right? So then I could punch somebody, flip the meteor, and then use space to get to the other far end and flip that meteor too, and still punch somebody if I wanted to punch him off and try to flip it. And obviously he's got reality, so like flips are like ridiculously easy on like meteors, right? So like knowing you can do those kind of things are important to the layout of the crisis, right?
And that's for every crisis, or at least every secure.
Yeah, that's for every crisis. Just
Okay.
like just knowing there's universal like things that we all know, like a medium base medium mover can double move to a B or an F and be within contest range of it, right? So it's common for a criminal syndicate player to take lizard and just double move and take your point because they count as 2, right?
Yeah, I think that's important. Like generally speaking, knowing distances relative to base sizes and movement speeds, yada yada, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you get into the specifics of your roster, and that takes reps. So knowing like what your pieces do and like how well they do them. So for instance, the tournament that we had last weekend, was it last weekend? Yeah.
Yeah, it was last weekend.
Yeah.
In my final game versus Michael, we were on Scoundrels, and I had set up Black Panther smack dab in the mid. Since he's a long mover, he can go to either back F of Michael's, and it was actually Scoundrels cubes, and I knew he was running Wakanda, so I knew he was going to do some extract jank, try to tempo me out. So I set up Panther mid. He was going to steal mid cube. I was going to move Panther to a back cube and steal his. So I set him up mid, which was a great play. But then I set up Sam right next to him because I figured Sam could go either way depending on how he set up and how the round 1 was unfolding. I think it was a mistake though because Sam is so good on Scoundrels. And let me preface, I was running Steve 1, so he could charge round 1. Sam is so good on Scoundrels that I think on that team, you want to have 2 attacks on Scoundrels with Sam. You want to set him up.
You want to be able to charge and then wing another shield.
Yeah, exactly. You want to set him up to where he is within distance of one of your back Fs to be on the front of it after a charge to be able to attack twice or up to 4 times, which is like ridiculous displacement potentially, especially when he ignores cover on Scoundrels with a shield. So that was something that occurred to me after I had set him up. When I was activating him, I'm like, oh, he doesn't even make it to the back F. I totally missed an attack, and I could have pushed people off and potentially completely denied him a VP. So some of these things just take reps to figure out like your team and how they play on certain scenarios, and especially your own.
Well, yeah, like I was telling Logan on Friday, I was telling him that like he was doing something with Bill, and I told him, I was like, so Bill can move, bump, grab an objective, and walk back. So he can center steal in Midnight Suns for free, basically.
Yeah, they don't even need eyes on the prize.
Yeah, they don't even need on the prize, which is fantastic. Like, so knowing that you can do those kind of things are also important. As like, especially so the other thing to consider with like, I guess what's in it? What was the next alphabetical order? Extract or scare intrusions?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
At least that was the next thing that came up on Jarvis Protocol.
Yeah, let's talk about intrusions.
Not gonna lie,
Jarvis wouldn't lead us astray.
I love not gonna lie, like my opinions on intrusions, I don't see it enough to really have too much of an opinion other than it's 19 threat. I know attrition doesn't hate it. And it can cause some chaos with how the portals work.
So I like intrusions. Intrusions is an interesting crisis, right?
Oh, I never said it was a bad crisis or anything. I haven't had enough exposure to it to really have too much of an opinion one way or the other.
Well, you don't play a lot of attrition teams that want to fight along the center line rather than the mid line, like rather than the up and down, as opposed to like the center line. So like when you play teams that are like Hulk is awesome at portals, right? Because he can just like, oh, I'm gonna portal over here, I'm gonna smack the mess out of you, and then I'm gonna portal over here and smack the mess out of you, and then I'm gonna gamma leap over here, right? Like he can do so many things. It just like makes his kit just ridiculous, right? I'm gonna throw somebody over here, do this. So like that kind of crisis favors the teams that want to fight in the middle and don't have a lot of guns, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that you can't take a character that's kind of shooty, because you can always take a character that's kind of shooty and park him on the corner side of, but just know that he's probably going to get ported into and somebody may lay into him, right? That's always something to think about.
Some shooty characters actually good on intrusions. Like like Dynamo, right?
Dynamo is really good on just like he can just line up fantastic beam.
Yeah, he ports and gets a perfect setup and range 4, and he just licks everybody with his beam.
Yeah, and then he's like stuck in the middle of everybody, so his like disruption fields are like always on, right?
Yeah, he's a tank.
You know what would be a good tactics card randomly I thought about with that? Sandman and Electro's card, the static shock or whatever the hell it is.
The static shock would probably be pretty good on.
Just get everybody.
I mean, that card would definitely be good on Gamma. But
oh yeah,
I have to see with Sandman. I would have to sit and take a bunch of bases with Electro and see how you can line that up, because I don't know how that. It's like you're gonna be drawing like pentagrams on the table in salt and shit.
So is it fair to say that either along the center line or down the middle, are those crises that in general are going to be favoring an attrition type team?
Well, generally speaking, yes, because most of those crises that are like that are threes, right? So like intrusions is 3, demons is 3, gamma's 3. Like, I mean, gamma's a little weird. Gamma's a little weird. Gamma used to be like ridiculous on the other end, right?
I loved Gamma so bad.
Yeah, Gamma was ridiculous on the other end.
Man, I miss it so much.
Yeah, I bet all this Wakanda would be ridiculous with Spirit on old Gamma. Oh,
yeah,
like pushing people off the back point, you just score all of them on round 1.
You could score more than freaking scoundrels. It was ridiculous.
Yeah,
that new Wakanda would just be no fun with old.
Yeah, they would be awful. It'd be awful.
Well, it'd be less fun than playing against Kingpin Criminal Syndicate, honestly.
Yeah, it was such a good. Yeah. So yeah, most of them that are gonna have that kind of. They're going to be slow scoring, so attrition teams generally favor it. It also means attrition teams can bully points, and by bully points I mean like a character who can like sit on a point and basically disrupt everybody that tries to come close to you. Thanos is one of those characters, right? Like Thanos around a point, especially if he has like, I mean, even if it's space reality, right? Like he can cosmic portal people, he can punch them twice. He's probably throwing them, you know what I mean? Like, and he can use all that displacement and stuff to his advantage and he's tanky to just sit on a point, right? Another character who can do
he also
that
has
is like
Power of the
Hulk.
Cosmos, right?
Yeah.
Which
Which
is
is
a really big displacement tool.
the biggest. Well, and he like and Hulk is of that similar. Like Hulk can like double push you and throw you, or he can smash you and still throw you, right? Like he has a lot of potential to do stuff like that too. So
So
like that's what we mean by bully characters. So like characters who can bully like that are more favorable on the Crisis, where you have like are mid and they only score one. You know what I mean?
yeah, so maybe we, the other two that are like that are going to be demons and gamma. So maybe we kind of just eh, talk about those as a whole because they have a similar shape. What are your what are the differences between those? I mean, if you've got the same kind of idea, you have the same shape, you're going to have the same basic idea in terms of how you're playing it. But what are you looking at in terms of the difference between those? Why would you be picking one over the other? What would you see between one or the other that would change your plan?
So something like Gamma. So I've been thinking about Gamma in my shield roster. I think it's Gamma's good in my shield roster with Thanos, right? But the thing with Gamma is because the Gamma does damage to you, everybody tries to want to stay in that like kill box or whatever you want to call it, right? So if everybody's going to stay in that kill box, it becomes condensed, like the game becomes condensed, right? So like melee, like range 2 characters are a lot stronger in a condensed environment, right? So demons on the other hand though, it scores so slow, you don't even have to like have anybody's like contesting the midpoint. You can just be like, well, okay, you're gonna keep your back point. I don't care about midpoint. I'm gonna try to break parity on extracts.
Well, if you
Go ahead.
compare Gamma and Demons, right? They both score the same in mid, but you were really punished for pushing mid with Demons, which makes Beta Ray Bill the premier bully on Demons.
Yeah,
He is
by far.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like Demons, if you have a way like a Bill or a Ghost Rider or something that doesn't take Incinerate, I mean, you can kind of bully it like you do on Gamma without like Incinerate is just so brutal, and the way that Demons is worded still, like
Yeah,
it's kind of a death trap. If you die on Demon,
Well, and
you wake up incinerated again.
well, and Shield just loves demons, right? Because your opponent's models are getting incinerated. It scores slow. You can camp somebody on that back point who probably has stealth, probably not really getting any attacks their way, right? And just go where the extracts are and use your range to drop guns into your opponent, right? That they're incinerated and you're, like a Fury activation against an incinerated model is ridiculous, right? If it's like 2 grunt attacks with a reroll and then 2 Fury spenders, right? And then 2 more grunt attacks with a reroll into an incinerated model is just ridiculous.
So anything
Those
else?
are always things to consider.
So anything else we kind of want to think through on those particular shapes of secures?
I feel like intrusions, you need more people who can push mid. Like Demons and Gamma, you don't really need a lot of people who can push mid. You can kind of cluster back farther if you have like a gun line. But intrusions,
and obviously if it's demons, right, you don't even have to be anywhere. You just have one person and then everybody else is like in cover, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, you can just kind of typically, I don't know, Demons plays out differently, but usually people aren't gunning to like steal your back demon, and typically the mid demon doesn't have a ton of priority. Because it depends on the match too. I think if it's an objective team, they have more of an incentive to take the mid demon than if it's just attrition versus attrition. Because like the difference between taking a mid point and not for an objective team can make the break point for scoring out like a complete round earlier. So they have a lot more incentive. If it's two attrition teams and it ends up on like virus and demons, like nobody's taking the mid one.
Yeah.
No, I would agree.
Okay.
I mean, unless they got like, even if they got Bill, well, maybe if they got Bill, maybe they just go up there late in the round.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there are exceptions, right? But it's like if there's 6 points on the board, you're probably just thumping each other and trying to keep close in score. You're not trying to like hit 16, but you don't want to fall so far behind that they can beat you on score by round 6.
Yeah.
At sub 16.
So let's move on to. I was thinking just in terms of having the different crises. There's sort of different categories of them. Riots, Infinity, and Cosmic Invasions sort of feel like they're similar in that you're not flipping anything. You're just parking on stuff. So how do you? I mean, is that fair to sort of put them all in the same category? And if so, how do we? What do you think about when you're working with those crises?
You're just talking about the distinction between pay to flips and contests.
No, he's talking about like Infinity Formula. He's talking about the B and the 2Ds, right? Infinity Formula,
okay,
Cosmic Invasion, and
so the non pay to flip
right.
B and Ds.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Myself, I like the first thing I think of. I mean, two of those are D crises, two D secures. I think about who can get there. Personally, just because with how they're spread out, it's not quite the same as like a B, because if I remember correctly, what a medium base can get from one B to the other with at least
yes,
with at least one move, but they're not on the far end.
If they're on the front end of it,
inside, yeah.
Cross bees.
Yeah, bees from across from each other.
But they can't go the distance. They can't go the width of the table, right? So
that's the largest gap in the game is between two back bees.
Of the table on a B.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. But D's, something about them's like because the movement's not quite the same going from one corner to another corner.
The thing about a D is there's not a lot of models in the game that can stand on one D and attack another D, right?
That's what it
they
is.
have
That's
to
what
do
it is.
shenanigans to do it, right? Like so, like if Hawkeye wanted to do it, Hawkeye could move, attack that other D, and then hook arrow back, right?
Right.
There's not very many characters in the game who can do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Shuri's a good example, but like the opposite. Instead of her moving,
just attack, right? Because you can just shoot across, as opposed to like on a D, it's very difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely value action economy on a D more than you do probably any other crisis. I mean, maybe sword, because I guess if you're flipping a bunch of sword points, but action economy is at its best on a D, which is why webs are so good at Ds, right? Because majority of their characters have like outstanding action suppression, right?
Action economy and move speed, right?
Yeah. It's
because a lot of the scenario teams have figured out that like on a D, it takes so much expenditure from the opposing team to rotate that it basically neuters their attrition capacity, right? They're spending all their movement trying to like rotate with the objective team, and if they don't have long movers or people with some sort of placing or charges or something, like it becomes really very hard to actually kill the opposing objective team before they score out.
Well, and I mean, like at the last event I was playing Tom, and he was playing with Bishop, and I was playing with Amazing Spider-Man, or not Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Spectacular Spider-Man and Shield, right? So there was a round where I had Spectacular because he went up. I just put Spectacular on the D because I was like, Spectacular, whatever. He's tanky enough. He probably doesn't get dazed right there with just Bishop, right? So he cat and mouse Bishop up, and then he moved and shot and threw a size 3 terrain piece into Parker, and Parker barely lived. He was on 1, right? So I had Prio going into the next round. So I was like, okay, Parker's on 1. I need to get out of this situation. So I impact webbed his Bishop and pushed him out to max 3, and then I threw him away, and then I web swung and moved and got to the other D. And knowing that you can do those kind of things are important with the characters that you choose on the Crisis, right?
So just to clarify for people listening, you're talking you impact webbing him to max 3. You're saying you backstopped him somehow?
Yeah. I had so I had already measured. I knew that no matter what he could do, the push was not going to get him out of maximum distance for me, right? So
you're kind of
I already
up in his face. You
3.
impact webbing. Okay.
I took the range 3 and I laid it down and went, okay, I know if I got the push here, there's no way he can get out of range 3 of this throw, right?
Gotcha.
So Spectacular Spider-Man's throw is fantastic. His throw is so good. A range 3 throw, if you don't if you're not playing with those, man, it's so cool.
It's spectacular.
It's so fun. Yeah. So I impact webbed him and threw him max distance and then went back to my far D. So he spent 2 entire activations just getting Bishop back into the game. Bishop was so far away from the game that he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, that's one thing Bishop doesn't have is action economy.
Right.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Those are things to consider when you're playing on a D, or if you're intending on bringing Ds to your Crisis selection, right? You want to have characters that can.
Yeah, at this point in the game, if you're not a hardcore objective team, you don't bring Ds.
Yeah, you don't bring Ds.
Yeah,
it's such a skewed layout that until they adjust crises or something, Ds are just kind of objective team territory.
So what if you're a tall attrition team and you get put on 1 though? How do you respond to that? What do you do to mitigate the disadvantage that you're at?
Well, the first thing you're going to do is, this is going to get into extracts, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But this is where important part of picking your extracts becomes, right? So if your opponent if you get put on a D and you're an attrition team, well, then you don't want to be playing something like cubes. You don't want to be playing something that scores quickly, because you're just going to get obliterated on score, right? So you got to think about these things.
You're hoping they pull Researcher on a D, and then the D doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Then it doesn't matter. So those are always something to think about, right?
Okay.
And just, you can also, I would advise people out there to look at the overall meta. Look at the Longshanks and look at the other players' events. Look what they're playing. Look what they're doing. Look what rosters people are playing, and look what Crisis they're playing. So you can look at the Crisis and go, okay, lots of people are playing Gamma. Maybe I should have a plan for Gamma in my roster, right? There's always things to think about.
I'm trying to think of a tall attrition list that exists right now. That
there's
anything you could end up on a D.
That you could end up on a D?
Yeah, because let's really flesh it out here. If you end up on a D, we're assuming that they picked their blues, just for the sake of argument. So if you end up on Researcher, you could go to 15 and just play attrition and camp the Researcher and make the D irrelevant. Your other 2 extracts are going to be probably Virus and
it's gonna be something slow.
Something. hammers
like
or
Montesi.
Montesi alien ships. Maybe
Yeah.
scrolls. It
Maybe-
just
maybe
depends on your
scrolls.
list. But
So kind of what
Like-
I'm hearing in that scenario is you punt on the secure a little bit and you just really focus on making up your ground on your extracts.
kind of you like the researcher is kind of the ace in the hole for the scenario or the attrition team, but
Right, because it's an extract that's a secure.
yeah, I mean it makes the D irrelevant.
Right.
If you have researcher, you win the game.
Yeah.
So
Or at least should win the game.
I mean, they have to commit to researcher, and then maybe they take it off of you, but they're probably not be able to camp all the Ds as well, and it just gets grindy because they have to sit on the researcher, or they just they spread out and they like try to take the back and the two side Ds, and you just move researcher back and you camp your back D, and you have parity, but you have a concentration of people that they don't because they're spread out. And you can just leverage that into like start killing their team, and then you take a side point. And now you have 4 points to their 2. And then what do you do then?
Yeah, then
I agree.
You can't chicken each other because they can't sit on there and win, right? You just sit on your side and go, okay,
Yeah.
come into me and die, or stay out there and lose, right?
Yeah. So like I don't think tall teams do especially well on Ds. So
No, they don't.
I think if you're taking a tall team into a D, you're probably gonna lose at this point in the game. I don't know. I'd have to sit down and think about it, but they've nerfed a lot of characters that could fight on a D and win. Like specifically tall characters like Malekith and Cosmic Ghost Rider.
Mal's okay on a D, right? With
He's still good.
and...
Yeah, if you're running him in I don't think you run him out of a fill. So yeah, I mean
No.
if he's in Cabal, you can take Black Bifrost and do the portal. That definitely shores up some of the weakness there. And Cosmic Ghost Rider, I don't know.
I have been liking Thanos' shield because of Shieldmobile. Shieldmobile is so good on a freaking D, but it's still. I've noticed that on those prices I've been treading uphill, and I don't know if I like it. I think I might just end up going wide shield.
Well, you gotta. So like on Virus, you're taking 4 wide on Virus though with Thanos, right?
Yeah.
So even like quote unquote tall is still 4 wide. When I think of tall, I'm thinking like 3. Obviously 4 is tall-ish on like 19 or 20. When you could go like otherwise like 6 to maybe 7, but still 4 is respectable. Like 3, like before the CGR nerf, like 3 was kind of like the tall.
Yeah.
The definition of tall. And I don't know if you can play 3 on a D. You just don't get enough. You can't cover enough space.
Yeah, it's hard.
Think. It's very difficult, especially when the team that's bringing the D is so good at rotating.
Yeah. And your characters have to be so good. Their action compression has to be so good to be able to catch because they're going to take extracts and try to run away with them, right? So
yeah.
Like, you have to have somebody who can chase those guys down.
Yeah, and it's way harder to table your opponent on a D than it is on an E.
Because you're assuming that your opponent's going to have to at least waste one move action, to get there.
Yeah,
and before they can attack.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about.
Well, like if you fall behind on the scoring and they're able to just stay alive with one character, even if they're injured, and they just have too much of a lead on you, you lose at the end of round 6. Doesn't matter how much you killed if you haven't tabled them. And on a D, it's pretty hard to table. Just the distance you have to cover and sacrificing actions to do so, it's very difficult, especially with the nerfed big guys. I think you have to go a little wider. And even then, like you're just kind of at a disadvantage on a D.
Even if you're trying, like, say you do. I mean, even the old like, I'm gonna mothership Thanos or freaking Asteroid M Magneto, right?
Mhm.
I don't even know if those are any, like, the teams now are so fast and like hard to keep up with.
But asteroid emming Magneto on a D feels real bad.
It does.
It's
It
like,
does.
what do you
But
put me
feels
here
like
for? I'm gonna be here forever.
but it's like if you're in that situation, is it the thing to do, right? And those are always the things to consider.
I mean,
Like if say you're playing a Magneto Brotherhood roster, right?
do not play Magneto on a D. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just don't
So
do
then
it.
you build a plan with like Mystique or something to play on a D.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have.
Which is what I was saying about, you can play any crisis you want to as long as you have a plan for it. And I think you need to get reps at that plan and see if the plan is good enough before you like settle in on like, okay, yeah, they are good at like my roster is good at this crisis.
Yeah, I think when you're picking out like crises, you have to have a plan for, okay, if opponent brings X secure and I'm bringing X extract, like what's my plan? And if you don't have a plan, you have to change your extract or you have to change your team. And that doesn't mean like you have a favorable match into that. Like it might just like sometimes you're just unfavored. Like that's just going to happen. But you should have a plan even then to shore up that weakness to where it's not just a blowout.
Yeah, there's a difference between being unfavored and having it just be a disaster.
Yes.
And
Okay.
like against some of the like the scoring teams, it can get out of hand fast. Like
Right.
Oh yeah.
quick. They can go up like 7 to like 2, and then you're like, okay, what do I do now?
And that's something you've got to be conscious of right at the start of the game. One of the things you have to really be first in mind is, all right, how many points are available on the table? What do I need? Is this game going to run away from me? And if it's not, if it is, how do I stop it? Okay, so that's a discussion of the B and the D's. Let's move on to the kind of the next category of secures, the pay to flips. What's the things that players need to be thinking about when they think about a pay to flip?
First answer is power economy, right? You
Yep,
want to have
yep.
characters that have good power economy so that they can, because any teams that are going to have a power advantage on round 1 in the fact that they can like pick up an extract and interact with the cure, they're going to have an advantage on a pay to flip, right? So a lot of teams will want to build leaderships or tactics cards or just characters that generate multiple power to gain advantage on a pay to flip, right?
Which is why first class works so well with it.
Yep.
Yeah, and which is why Asgard, right? Because majority of their like I believe all of their affiliated characters generate 2 power. So like those kind of things are always something to consider.
So that gives you your round 1 advantage. Absent that, so taking that kind of that round 1 play out, what do you want to be thinking about when you're either playing into a pay to flip or you're trying to stop your opponent from working and being successful with the pay to flips? There in as the game goes on, what's your strategy?
Well, you got to look at the pay to flips themselves, right? Like there's meteors and there's mutant madmen, right? They both require a roll on on madmen, it's on your physical defense, on meteors, it's on your energy defense. So maybe you consider characters that have higher energy defense play meteors, right? Or higher physical defense to play madmen. It's not always that like clear cut, but it can matter, right? Because look at Vince at Adepticon. His Agent Venom missed a meteor flip because he has 2 energy defense. So like it happens, right? Those are the things to think about.
Yeah. Another thing to think about when it comes to pay to flips, they've had the most variety of table setup I've noticed. There's 4 or 5 different setups for pay to flips. You've got Madmen, you've got Sword, Meteors, and Spider Portals. Those are all 4 different setup types. So they're not all going to be quite the same, strictly just based on that alone.
the other thing to take advantage of too, right, is with pay to flips, you can flip a flip and then walk away from it. So like having last activation on a pay to flip is very valuable because you can like multiple flip things if you have action economy and can get around the table and make a bunch of flips and just flip the score out, right? Like you can have like a Thanos turn where he like spaces, he like flips one meteor or flips one sword base, spaces to the next sword base, flips that one, walks to the next one, flips that one, and walks to the last one and flips all four, right? Like that could totally change the game.
So in addition to looking at what the defense is for the rolls, at least on the ones that make sense, you really want to be looking at, do you have models that would be able to do that, to be able to get around and access multiple secures?
Action economy is pretty good on paid flips.
Sometimes it's
you
a
don't
double-edged.
have as many bodies either, right? Because you can have somebody who can just like flip one and then just leave it out there, force your opponent to come out there and try to flip it. You know,
If it's sword, not, but
yeah, I don't think you do it if it's sword, but like I think you could get away with doing it on like something like there's less incentive. It's say Mad Men. Mad Men is the big example of this. So on Infinity Formula and Mad Men, they're the same shape, right? But on Mad Men, you can flip those two crises on one side and pivot your whole team into the other side. And then if your opponent can't take those other points, it doesn't matter. You're still scoring them. Right. But on Infinity, you can't do that because you're losing the score if you leave that point, right?
Yeah, Madman is kind of hard to play.
Yeah.
It's
You
very
can
easy.
definitely,
It's very easy to mess up.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. I had
just
one
because
game at that tournament in Iowa where I like took Juggernaut and like shoved him up and dazed his voodoo in the middle of the table who had a hammer, and he flipped both madmen and was standing on the back madmen, and he didn't know what to do, so he ended up like running voodoo away. Like, it was just ridiculous. I ended up scoring like 3 of the hammers and 3 of the madmen on round 1. It was pretty ridiculous.
It's pretty good round 1.
On the energy. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
No, well, what I was gonna ask is I mean, a lot of the conversation is attrition versus scenario-based teams. Do pay to flips really benefit one of those two, or are they kind of their own separate animal?
So I think some of the attrition teams can play some of the pay to flips, right? Like I think X-Force can play sword pretty well, right? Because it's clustered up enough and they have enough action economy to where if they need to start taking points, they can easily do it. And they can just sit on points and shoot you, right? Which is great for them. So I think some attrition teams can play something like a sword or maybe meteors, but like Mad Men, you start to get into your mid range. It's like Avengers really like Mad Men, right? They have a lot of physical. They got a lot of characters who can move distances. They can push and throw people.
Those shield throws, though. Those shield throws will get you across the board.
Yeah.
Yep. So good. Sam is fantastic on Mad Men, right? Because he can just like
really good.
go everywhere, push people off. I mean, he's not as great on. He's better on Senators than he is, or not Senators, Scoundrels than he is on Mad Men, but he's still good on.
Maybe a Samless takes it. I don't think a Steveless takes it.
I don't think, because he does. That's the other thing to consider. Teams that want to spend their power to do stuff don't want to be spending power to flip extracts.
Yeah.
Or not extracts, I mean to flip secures, right?
Unless you're X-Men.
Unless you're X-Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like webs really don't like pay to flips because they got to spend power. They're already trying to do extract shenanigans. They don't want to be trying to spend their power to flip a secure.
most webs at this point in the game are running advanced R&D, right?
Yeah.
And if you're flipping points, it's kind of counterproductive.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and they can't just like you can't do the classic like the Gwen thing of like I move, I impact web, push you off, and then yoink you off the middle point because your opponent is still scoring it if it's right.
So does that mean a pay to flip can be at least some level of counter to a web's roster?
Yes. Yeah, I think you could play. You could play, but it's not
I don't know.
It's not the ultimate counter, right?
Right.
Because like
No,
Mad
no,
Men, Mad Men is still. I mean, webs can play Mad Men, right? Like ASM is fantastic on Mad Men.
yeah.
I was just
Right.
gonna say ASM is really good, and they probably get last activation on you. So
I think it's not necessarily a hard counter. It feels like it can kind of slow them down a little bit, but not necessarily something that you should bank on.
I do like Meteor webs because it's slow enough scoring, and it's close enough that you can kind of annoy them. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to what you were saying earlier about selecting characters who have defense that are high for the specific scenario, Patrick, it kind of is a double-edged sword against the energy flips, because the portals feels real bad getting ported range 2. Because not only are you displaced, but you're off the point, so you are not making it more difficult for your opponent to reflip it. And on meteors, you're taking a damage, which is never ideal. So if you got someone with 5 energy defense, like they're gonna flip it, but there's a good chance that they might take a damage or get ported, depending on which scenario you're on.
Well, and the thing with meteors too, right, is if you take that damage, you don't get a power for that damage, right? So that's like in place of like if an enemy does a damage to you and you're going to gain a power for that, right? Like so taking damage and not gaining power is bad, right?
Yes.
And you're spending power to flip. So you're essentially like if you don't make the flip, now you've lost 2 power and didn't make the flip.
Yeah, you lose the potential to gain a power from that health that you lost.
Right.
Yep. Also, pay to flips just suck.
Yeah.
just from a design standpoint, they are just kind of too random, in my opinion, in a random enough game.
Yeah, can just like walk over to your secure. They need 3 successes on 3 dice to get
annoying.
it, and they roll it, and they take it, and they win the game. Like, what do you do, right?
You just walk up to an uncontested pay to flip with a 4 defense person, roll 4 dice, and don't hit it, and you're like, why am I playing this game?
Yeah,
it's just like it's bad enough whiffing attacks and defense, and then you got to do it on your scoring too. It's just so annoying. I loathe pay to flips.
I can tell.
I don't play them at all. I don't build any rosters with pay to flips.
So that goes back to like X-Men have advantage there too, right? Because of first class.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really play the affiliations that prefer pay to flips anyway, so that helps. But
is the X-Men advantage on pay to flips just because of first class? Because you've got such a huge advantage on round 1.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep, and
it's not necessarily the round 1; it's the round 2, right?
Yeah,
because you were able to conserve your power round 1.
Right.
So round 2, you have superpowers that are more active.
Right. I guess you're doing the thing
with the car or whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah. Like anybody else can play the game like X-Men can round 1, but they're going to be hurting round 2 because they spend all their power.
Right. That makes sense. So
the other thing too with like you could also consider like Storm's leadership, like the Storm Hop. You can do some interesting plays with extracts. The Storm Hop, right? Where you can like pick it up and run away with it. You know what I mean?
Cost of power now, though. But I guess with the first class they pick up for free.
Still,
and it's not a discount or not a refund like Mystique. So you can actually be next to something with 0 power and still interact with it.
So anything else anything else that we want to kind of think through on pay to flips? Other than that, we just have kind of the one weirdo secure left.
Oh wait, there's one more thing on pay to flips to think about. So we talked about how people will take characters that have higher defense for the flip. So like you're going to want to take physical defense characters with Madman. You're going to want to take energy defense with. So it's not extremely important, but it is something to think about. That maybe I don't want to bring this character because he has energy attacks into higher defense energy. It's not like an exact science. If a character's good, right? You can take them regardless. But it's just something to think about, right?
So like in something like Mad Men, you might be slightly disincentivized to take physical attacks because the crisis is going to push people to have higher physical defense anyway. Okay, anything else we want to go over with regards to pay to flips? Other than that, we can move on to the last secure. We haven't talked about
push. We're talking about sword push.
We haven't talked about that. Yep.
Sword, you got to remember that the push on sword can change the entire landscape of what you're looking at, right? Like pushing a character all of a sudden changes. Oh, like they have priority. If I push this character out, now that character can't do what it wants to do, right?
Right.
So like winning the secure to get to push a model is very valuable. And it's something you could even build into what your plan is, right?
Well, it's also kind of a rich get richer circumstance anyway, because if you're winning, if you're getting to push, that means you've already, you've got an advantage on the secures and on the victory points anyway. So you're really kind of able to go from strength to strength.
And there's other little like random cute synergies like tricks and traps or things that trigger off movement are a little bit they're a little bit cool for something like the sword pushes and stuff.
Right, you can sword push somebody into a booby trap.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something that I would like massively build a game plan around, but it's cute, right? It does a thing.
It is fun to push someone into a booby trap. That I'm not gonna lie.
It is fun to push somebody into Heimdall and have Heimdall just blunk, just
True.
stomp him in the face. Not that Heimdall's like some breakout character, but it is always fun.
I miss old sword base.
Yeah.
14 threat on a C. 3 points.
Yeah.
You only need 2 to get the push. It was so degenerate and I loved it. It was great.
So degenerate. It
was the only pay to flip I really liked playing. But that's me. That's me talking.
And it was a C too, so it was so spread out.
Yeah. Well, 14 points was like crazy too. I kind of wish there was still a 14 threat scenario of some sort.
Yeah, 14 threat would be so interesting.
There's a reason they took it out.
Yeah. Yeah. You get so degenerate.
Okay, so that leaves us with just one crisis left to go, which is Mayor Fisk's witnesses. So obviously one of the things, because it hands out the stun, obviously this is a secure that really incentivizes having stun immune characters, just like Demons incentivizes having incinerate immune characters. So other than that sort of obvious play, what else should you be thinking about when either you see Fisk or you're thinking about Fisk might be something you want to put in your roster?
I guess the first thing with Fisk is right. So the funny, like in the statistics, right? If you look at the statistics, 16 threat is not taken very often. And I feel like a lot of people don't really have a good 16 plan. So like Fisk can do this weird thing because it is a 16 where you're like, you could put your opponent in a situation where they're like, I don't know what to play on 16, right? And so that's something to think about. Granted, Fisk, I feel like a lot of people don't know how to play Fisk. And even the last time I played Fisk, I like completely played it just like terrible.
Yeah,
And like
I agree. Last time I got stuck on Fisk, at the end of the game, I realized I had no idea what I was doing.
well,
The butterfly effect of like multiple stuns is very hard to predict.
Yes. Well,
it could change it can completely alter the course of the game if you have like 3 or 4 people stunned after round 1.
Yeah.
To where you're like, oh wow, I just went up 4 points or whatever, but now I'm completely toast just because I have like 0 power.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like even the last game that I played on Fisk, I should have had my Thanos on the inside so that I could reach the other Fisk, but I didn't. I was like thinking for some reason I wanted to keep my Thanos safe on the outside end, and like I wasn't able to like influence anything, and I couldn't Death Decree to the other side, and I didn't even think about trying to move the two Fisks closer to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that should have been something that I should have tried to do. And that's always something to think about. Like if you're an attrition team and you want to beat up people, then maybe you consider moving the Fisks closer. And if you're wanting to score out, maybe you move them farther apart so that it's easier to isolate people.
Well, that's the other difference, right? Is that your opponent, if you're controlling the Fisk, the opponent moves it.
Right.
So in order for you to actually move it, you have to be losing it, which is kind of a weird dynamic.
And it's a lot of points, right? 4 points on a secure. Like if your opponent takes both of them, it's 2 points. If they take both of them, they're scoring 4. That can be a hole, especially if they've broken parity on extracts. Like if they're holding 2 extracts and you got 1, and now they go up 4, so they go up 6 to your 1.
I think that's
right?
like best. That's like one of the better case scenarios too, because I don't think scenario teams are bringing Fisk anyway, right?
Yeah.
So like if it's Fisk and like Virus or something, or ships, whatever the 3 is, like it's probably more likely that it's like Fisk into like I don't know, cubes or something.
Cubes, fighters, yeah. And
So
then they could potentially go up 7 to your like 2, or not even 2, 1. Yeah, 2.
Yeah. To piggyback on your point, the only other secure in the game that has a 2-point secure is Fisk. Or sorry, is Riot Jesus. Is Gamma. The back point. Right?
Back point.
Fisk has 2 of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And you only need a model on each.
Yeah.
Right.
To
And
every
other secure that has 4 points, you've got to literally be all over the board to be able to score 4.
Yeah, you need twice as many models to take them.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it can get out of hand very quickly.
The other thing with Fisk too is like if you're looking to play Fisk, maybe you start looking at the stun immune characters like Mal. Mal's an excellent Fisk model, right? So is like the Hulks. The Hulks are really good at Fisk, right? It's like these are things to consider. Right?
Logan, Wolverine, and Baku, Bishop.
Yeah. Like people are immune to people who have healing factor, people who can remove conditions, people who don't necessarily care if they're stunned or not. Like somebody like Lizard doesn't really care if he's stunned or not. He's got healing factor. He's probably not generating power anyway. He's probably just standing. So like Kingpin Fisk can be dangerous on Fisk, right? Because they could just park 2 models on each point and then go, now you got to commit 4 models to even contest. Right? So it just becomes so much of a burden.
It can get out of hand for an attrition team.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely.
You have to really consider that scenario when you're bringing it in your list.
So because it's handing stun out, does it give an advantage to leaderships that can hand out power or move power around? Is that something where you might have if your leadership is generating power, that can kind of mitigate some of the damage or the harm that you'll be taking on Fisk? Does that make enough of a difference to make it worth thinking about?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it does give you a slight advantage. I would say even more. And like what I'm about to say, like they're not very meta, but the fills that let you clear conditions,
Yes,
are way more favored there. So it'd be like Winterguard and Asgard.
Hydra.
What was it?
Right? I think Hydra plays.
Oh yeah, Hydra could do it too. Yeah, that's for sure. Or I mean, I don't think it's a good idea, but Avengers has one turn where they can do second wind.
Well, and Avengers themselves have a lot of stun immune characters anyway, right? Like they've got Hulk, they've got Thor, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's another thing with Asgard. Thor's already immune, and then you can clear it on the other people.
You can clear conditions too, yeah. So they could play Fisk as well.
And they have a lot of displacement. So
Fisk is just one of those weird crises. Like, I mean, there's probably a team out there that maybe wants to try to build a plan where they actually score it, but I don't know if that's worth the risk.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's worth it to bring a scoring team and to purposely bring Fisk, knowing that you might end up stuck on somebody's extracts that are really slow, and then you're like, if they push you, you know, what happens? You maybe score 2.
So if you see Fisk, I mean, if you get plopped on it, what's your game? What is your game plan? Is it because there's 4 victory points, so it's hard to ignore. I mean, how do you deal with it?
Are you talking if your opponent brings it?
Yeah. I mean, if your opponent brings it and you end up having to play it, if you know, so
and you have a lot of experience on what to do. Well, I think you need to. I think the first thing you need to do is identify. It's the concept of the beatdown, right? Like, am I the beatdown team? Am I the scoring team? Like, what am I trying to do? Is my opponent a scoring team? So do I think that they can outscore me? Maybe I need to like pivot and go, okay, now I just got to beat them up, right? Those are always things to think about.
Yeah, there are a good number of beatdown teams that have stun immune characters as well.
Yeah, that's the thing too.
So like all the big guys, Thanos, Malekith, Hulk, I-Hulk, I mean, they all have stun immune, so it allows you to just go for the throat on one of the secures and not worry about it.
Well, and like Hulk, like he likes taking damage, right? Like that's good for him. He's adding more dice, right? Like he can take.
Yeah, he doesn't really care.
Yeah, it's not.
He kind of likes taking 4 damage.
That's true.
It is what it is, right?
So I think if you get Fisk plopped down in your scenario team, I mean you're playing your extracts. There could be a lot of points on the board. I think you have a ton of game into that. Even if you get stunned on a good amount of your characters, like I don't know, like if you're playing against a beatdown team, you're probably wider, so you get last act. You can like push or throw somebody off, get on there for cheap, like maybe 1 model, and you steal it rather than like committing 2 or 3.
Well, and the other thing too to consider, right, is sometimes in a situation like that, I've had opponents where if I'm playing the scoring team and I score the Fisk, they're trying to like move it away from me so I don't keep scoring it. So maybe they're not even stunning me and doing damage to me because they're trying to pull it towards them.
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. Like what do you do with the Fisk when you have the control of moving it? Do you move it into their team to try to stun and damage as many people? Because the disadvantage of that is that you are moving the objective deeper into their team, and you are giving them the
basically you make it easier for them to score more.
Positional advantage. You're giving them positional advantage.
Yeah,
right?
positional advantage. So like they don't even have to move. They can just sit on the point and like blast you, and you have to like waste actions to get to the point if you want to take it.
So
and if you don't, like they're already stunned, whatever. Like they take more damage and they score 2 more again.
And you also have to consider moving it to damage your own models too, right? Like maybe you're like, well, I want to stay within one of this. Maybe I just suck it up and take the damage, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. If you have someone who has like 0 action economy and you want to like get
and you're just like, I'm
full
gonna
use
move.
out of their actions.
My opponent scored this one. Now I'm gonna move it over here where my model's scoring it, even if they do take the damage, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to consider with Fisk. It's very nuanced. It's probably
Which is why people don't play it. Right. It's kind of hard. It takes a lot of reps. I think it takes a lot of like just playing it and going, okay, this is what I need to do here. Because
it's super weird. It'll kick you in your ass when you think you like mastered it, and you'll be like, oh yeah.
Well, it's
I just
definitely
lost
one
on
of those
Fisk because
prices that can just get weird really fast. It could just get. It could be like it could score quickly or it could score really slowly. It's like,
yep. You can sit there and like have a bunch of pushes, like not push, but like poker term push,
Right.
where you just like nobody's scoring anything. It's just like super slow. Or I mean, 4 points on the board is like that's a lot of points, especially when you can do it with 2 models.
So is there a particular affiliation or a type of affiliation that probably should, that at least Fisk might be worth thinking about? I know we talked about ones that can remove conditions, which could really give you a significant advantage. And other than that, anything else in terms of like either an affiliation or a type of a team where they could use Fisk's weirdness and people's lack of experience with it to their advantage?
I mean, I think immediately you look at Avengers, right? Like Avengers has a ton of stun immune characters that are good, and they also have a lot of pushes and throws, so they can like just kind of like bully them pretty easily, right? So I mean, I think you should be considering it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the thing to do, but
yeah. I mean, they've got what, Wolverine, Thor, and Hulk.
Yeah.
I'm not a big Wolverine fan. I like Thor under Steve, but not necessarily under Sam. And Hulk's just good.
Hulk is just.
But if you're playing Fisk, you have to kind of have a 16 plan, since 16 is the threat attached to that card. So if you're playing Thor, you're probably playing Steve 1. So that's 9 points. If you add in Hulk, you're at 15. That's kind of awkward. You have 1 point left.
Yeah.
So you'd have to drop like Hulk or Thor for.
Oh yeah.
Or and then put in Wolverine. I don't know. It's weird. I think another one is
you don't even necessarily have to like go, okay, I have all these characters that I mean to take all of them. Maybe it's just take Hulk, and Hulk bullies the 1 point, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ideally you'd probably want to, but maybe you just don't get to do that sometimes.
Yeah, maybe it just doesn't work out. Like the threat just doesn't. You're just like, well, whatever.
I suppose some of it's going to depend on what the extract is that comes along with it.
Yeah. I think another one to consider is Wakanda, because they have M'Baku, who's immune to stun, and they can kind of just play whatever. Like Wakanda's very flexible. They can play a beatdown or they can play a scenario game. So,
and does Ox leadership remove stun?
No, it's slow incinerate shock.
It's slow incinerate shock. Okay.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's not something to think about.
No, and like I don't really like Drucker Hydra. I don't think it's very good.
No, I don't think.
Maybe if the new Asgard box is like brilliant, we can dojo an Asgard list with Fisk.
I suspect we'll probably be doing that because
I am super excited for that. I want to see. I hope Thor. Is he Thor King of Asgard? Thor King of Asgard. That's
probably.
His name.
Something like that.
I'm hoping he's like 6 threat and a fucking beat stick. I want like just I want to see him like flying everywhere, throwing fucking hammers, and like chucking people. I just want to see it all, right?
You want to see the Thor that shows up in Endgame.
I want to see Thor Ragnarok Thor, right? Like,
I'm curious as heck. I mean, I'm really excited for Mighty Thor, but I'm really interested to see what the new Loki is going to look like, and if they're going to give him a leadership.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I want him to be affiliated Convocation so badly. I want him affiliated.
It does make a ton of sense.
Wizard, the wizard, he does magic.
It does make a ton
Give
of
me
sense.
Loki.
I think with Fisk in mind, though, you have to.
Is Loki on a meme base?
Probably.
Is he
I
what?
think he is. The new Loki. I think
base?
he's on a medium base.
I think he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he is. Anyways, go back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
With Fisk in mind, I think you still have to stick with OG Thor though.
Yeah.
Depending on, I mean, if the new Thor is stun immune as well, like you could probably just lead into him harder to like contest. But between being stun immune and having the leadership to clear stun from your characters, I definitely think they have an advantage in that match.
Yeah.
So if they can get a booster from the box, like maybe we can have some discussions on Asgard. They're just not super great. They're fine, but they have problems just playing into the meta, I think.
Yeah.
I think they probably play into the beatdown teams better than the scenario teams, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, and they have access to Bill in affiliation, right? Bill's amazing. So
that's true.
Anytime you have Bill in affiliation, that's good.
Well, they have two size 4 throws basically as a core. So that's pretty strong, especially if you're playing into size 4 characters. Then you just get infinity damage 5s for 3 power.
Yeah.
Like
that's
pretty
terrible.
Good. Yeah, it's
pretty good. With the prevalence of Rhino, like I mean, I think if Asgard got enough in the box, they just don't have anybody. Like they just wither on Ds.
They do wither on Ds.
They're just too expensive. They're too expensive to go wide, and they're not fast enough to rotate. So,
yeah.
So, any other thoughts just on Secures as a whole? I mean, we went into sort of broke down the different categories. Any thoughts in general in terms of what you should be thinking about list building with Secures? What should you be thinking about in terms of when you look over at your opponents? How you should be reading your Secures? Any other kind of closing thoughts to wrap up what we want to talk about?
I think the biggest thing is you should always be aware of speed of the crisis. Like if you're not aware of the speed of the crisis, like that's just I think that's like one of the core elements of like knowing that, hey, this crisis is going to score slowly, or this one is going to score fast. How do I have a plan here, right? And how do I build that into something I can leverage for advantage on the crises that I bring?
So when you're looking at your opponent's stuff, you want to see what you have overlap with, right? Mm-hmm. If you have 2 of the same on one side and like none of the same on the other, you pick the one that you have none of the same of, and then you're probably landing on a favorable setup.
Assuming you've chosen your crisis correctly.
Right. Yeah. Very true. Very true. If it's like 2 and 1, you probably still pick the one where you have fewer, unless the one that's in their other where you have 2 of the same. If the one that you don't have the same of is like super bad for your list, you might consider picking that one instead to dodge that. I don't know if there's a ton of scenarios where that happens, but definitely a researcher would be a consideration there for scenario teams. Mm-hmm. Other than that, you might look at maybe not what your list does so well on the things, but maybe what your opponent's list does. Mm-hmm. If they're really good on a certain scenario, maybe you pick the other one.
Right.
Or you pick that one so that you dodge that their side of it.
Right. So part of it you need to be kind of taking what their crises are as them telling you what they want to do and figure out how to counter it.
Yeah, and looking at their list
Right.
And seeing if they have like some lists, like they have like 2 strong ones and then maybe one that they're like okay at or whatever. Some of them are good at everything, but
Right.
I mean, you usually have like one that's kind of weaker. So depending on your overlap,
Right.
it could determine what you're picking.
Okay.
The other thing to consider too is sometimes some of the crises have something that you want, like Infinity Formula, right? Like Infinity Formula gives you power,
Right.
right? So like in the power phase, you can generate. Well, no, it's cleanup now, right? They moved, or it's no.
I don't think
Infinity's
Infinity
still
Formula got
power.
touched.
Infinity
What's up?
Formula is still power. Infinity
Yeah,
Formula.
it's power phase. Yeah, they didn't touch
It's power
Infinity
phase.
Formula.
Cubes changed.
Yeah,
Changed
cubes did.
to
The damage changed.
cleanup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, the power you gain
Yeah,
the power.
the
in
power.
cleanup, too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But so yeah, Infinity Formula gives you power. So maybe you want to think about like maybe I want to play Infinity Formula because I want to leverage something that I can do with that. Like say I have Cat, right? Cat can double move to any of the Infinity Formulas and stand outside of one of somebody and gain. She can just double move over there and stand over there and threaten to steal on the next round. And then it becomes like, okay, do I attack Cat? Like that's not really like it's attacking Cat is rough, right?
Yeah.
You're never gonna do. You're always gonna do less damage than you think you will. That happened to me yesterday, where I was like, "Oh, I got Thanos with a hammer, and I got rerolls. I can put 3 damage on Cat, right? Like, nope. So
no rerolls, no explodes.
yeah.
You get what you
It's
get, and you
awful.
don't get upset,
Yeah.
David.
Yep.
And yet they referred to what they did to her as a nerf.
So it makes Cat unappealing to attack. So it's like, what does your opponent do? Do they like run away from Cat so that they don't get their objective stolen? Or do they let her steal it and then run away? Steals it and run away, that's fantastic. Especially if it's like a hammer. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's a lot of things to think about.
Yeah,
with
and then
it,
even
like,
even if they run away, it's almost like a pseudo stagger, like you've taken away one of their.
Exactly. Like they're wasting their priority activation to move some character that they didn't want to activate.
Right.
To protect themselves from getting their extract stolen. So there's things to think about there, definitely.
And Cat's like none the worse for the wear. She can still activate and troublemaker somebody.
Yep.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to steal.
Just hang out. Yeah, she could do that like last activation. Like she could just hang out over there. Like now you're like, oh, you fled the point. Now I'm just gonna stand over here. You know what I mean?
Any other final thoughts on secures?
I'm trying to think of like other secures that I mean, I guess demons with the incinerate, right? Maybe you consider if you're a fighting team, because it incinerates, maybe it incentivizes you to bring more attrition characters or characters that can make lots of attacks with low dice pools to affect the effectiveness of incinerate, right?
I'm glad you brought up demons because I was gonna make another point on that and I totally forgot. You want to be considering a character to put on your back demon. It is worth putting a character back there.
Why is
but
that?
depending on your, because it's like a point and it's a relatively safe area.
Yeah.
And if they are going to shoot them, fine, they're down a defense. But like they do have to kind of not overextend, but they have to extend probably beyond their comfort zone to shoot your guy, depending on how cagey you're playing him. If you're playing him on the front of the demon, the back of the demon. But there are characters who are inherently good at playing it, and they're just like, you start with them in your list, like Star-Lord. He can move up, he can hit and run, shoot and move back, and he's still safe on the back point. You've got Sam Wilson who can do the same thing. He charges up, moves back. And then other affiliations will either have someone in affiliation or a splash
like
that
Hawkeye can do it, right?
Yeah,
You've got
Bullseye. Somebody cheap. Somebody cheap with range. Even Wong. Something like that.
Even 4-threat Tony and Shield. I don't mind 4-threat Tony and Shield standing on that back point pushing people off, right?
Yeah.
Like Tony's
for sure.
He's already got damage reduction, so like that's better than any extra defense could ever be, right?
Yeah. You don't want to feel like you're sacrificing your efficacy of your list by planting somebody on the back. But you don't want to. Typically, you don't want to just abandon your back point either, because that does help you stay in the game, unless your plan is to completely table your opponent, which isn't usually a good idea.
The other thing with demons too, right, is so emphasis on the advantage of the characters that are immune to incinerate. So like the stuff you can do with Bill, right, is like you can just put Bill on their back point and force them to commit 2 characters to score that who are both going to get lit on fire, right? Like, you know what I mean? And Bill's tanky enough to just stand there.
Throughout the course of the game, you're not saying like move him up round 1 or whatever.
Yeah,
or
no.
round 2.
I'm just saying that like at some point in the game, you can go, okay, I'm going to put Bill on your back point. What do you do about that? Do you commit 2 characters to score this and they're both going to get incinerated? Or do you just let Bill stand there and score the point, right?
Right. And that could even work like round 1 as well, right? Or not round 1, midpoint.
Yeah.
Right? If they want to try to contest midpoint, they have to put 2 characters out there and probably aren't going to do that.
Both incinerated. And they're in danger, right? Anything on the midline is going to be in danger on round 2, right?
Yeah, 100%. Bill is definitely the man.
Yep. Yeah, Bill's real good.
Okay, so
Steve, just walk up, throw somebody off.
Steve, with under Steve 1, yeah.
Yeah. Bill just walks up, throws somebody off mid, stands there. What do you do?
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay, so we've covered secures on this episode, and we'll basically do the same, and we'll hit extracts when we get together next time. Any other closing thoughts?
I don't think I have anything on secures. I mean, there's obviously lots of stuff in the extract side that's going to kind of come back and overlap, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They don't really exist in bubbles. It's
a
complete. You play it as a complete game, so the discussion is probably there's gonna be some overlap there.
Yeah, it is a little stilted to talk about just secures when whatever the extract is makes such a difference in terms of how you're looking at it. That's true.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some things we didn't think about, but I think we covered the secures pretty well.
Well, that's what we have an audience for. That they'll let us know.
Well, just remember, understand your shape, understand where you can get to with what characters, understand the speed of the crisis, and I mean that's pretty much what you're looking at, right?
And the pay to flips and contests, right?
Yeah.
Like there's definitely a difference there.
Yeah.
Where if you're trying to gain points on contests, you are sacrificing some of your power on the board to gain points, whereas pay to flips you can move away and still leverage your whole team into their team, and vice versa. I mean, obviously they're going to do the same thing,
right?
Well, and some pay to flips could favor a taller attrition team because they can easily flip. Like Thanos is pretty good at sword, right? Just because he can just like flip a bunch of points. So like his efficiency of scoring for one character is really good, right? Like because if he flips 3 points and he's holding an extract, he's effectively gained you 4 VPs on that round, right?
It's a quarter of what. Well, not quite, but it's that you're right.
It's something to consider with a tall attrition, right?
Sure.
Maybe they could play something like.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a low score too, right? 15.
Yeah, and it's 15 threat. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? If you have a good Thanos team at 15 threat, that's like, so good. Thanos feels so oppressive on like sword with like.
You are
so good. I love playing him with shield. Like the team that's like Tony, Thanos, and like whatever 3 I want to take is so fucking good.
You are definitely in your Thanos phase of your career. That's for sure.
Well, it's like Thanos is gonna shield mobile up, punch, get off the point, flip it, go to the next point, flip that one. What do you do?
David used to spank off to Black Order in the day. He's
Yeah,
had a Thanos lodged in his butt before.
Hey,
All I
remember
want
that one game where I abducted your Immortal Hulk and dazed him on round 1 with Thanos?
I won that game, but I hated every minute of it.
Yes. Yeah,
I
that was
hated that game.
ridiculous. You were like,
I
that just
had to
happened.
walk that game off. That game was oh my god.
I'm not interested in any of this until they redo
Because
the.
I just what did I cosmic portal him up? Did I cosmic portal mind? I cosmic portal mind him up, and then Corvus is just like double attack. Death Decree.
It was 19. You brought Thanos, Corvus, Proxima, and Crimson Dynamo, and I had Hulk, Malekith, and Red Skull 2.
Yeah.
And that game, I was heated.
Those feel like
I had to walk that one off.
I just yoinked Immortal Hulk off the midline and just put Corvus into him. Then on the next round, Corvus has got like a fuck ton of power. And like just fucking cleaves Immortal Hulk.
If there's anything that go ahead, Patrick.
You lost him on round 2, right? You lost Immortal Hulk on round 2, right? I got him, right? Because I activated Corvus and just
think so.
Did the thing? Yeah.
It might have been 2, maybe 3, but I think it was 2.
Yeah, I think it was 2, because you were like, holy shit, that just happened. And but like the problem that I ran into was I wasn't scoring any points. Like I literally had no point because I hadn't picked up anybody. I hadn't picked up any of the extracts because I was so committed on my team just murdering fucking Immortal Hulk.
Yeah, I prefer to forget that game, but it's burned in my memory.
All right. Well, so next episode we'll be talking about extracts. Between now and then, please make sure that you rate and review us on your podcast app of choice. That really helps people find us and helps us grow the show. Please make sure to follow us on all the social medias, twitter.com, Facebook, Instagram, Witty Bantercast everywhere. wittybantercast@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us. We'd love to hear your questions. We'd love to see rosters that you'd like us to work on. We'd love to get feedback in terms of how we can do better with the podcast. Our next giveaway, we're set. We're going to be giving away Gwenom and Scarlet Spider. So make sure either you're a member of the Patreon so you get an entry, or you are leaving us a rating and a review, and then you send us a screenshot. That will get you an entry as well. Other than that, webheads, until next time, be good.